This video response is going to go out to Melinda in the Dust, and that is because you uploaded a video entitled 412Teens Finding My Worth in Christ. And the first thing I would like to say is that I agree with almost every point you make in your video. Allow me to illustrate. So what does make you valuable? Well, first of all, you should never compare your looks with others because looks fade, but you remain. What does that mean? Let me tell you something. This part of your body right here, this part, your brain, will outlast virtually every other part of your body. That's a fact. As a matter of fact, my advice to you, to anybody watching this video is, I would hope that you would maintain your brain and your heart for all the rest of your life. And I'll tell you why. Because if you don't maintain your brain and your heart, nothing else matters. You might think it does at a young age, but let me tell you something. When you get older, you're going to find out that I'm absolutely right on this. So like I said, my advice to you is maintain your brain, maintain your heart, because if you don't maintain those two, nothing else matters. I guarantee it. Okay. Now my next point is, just because someone can convey more humor than others doesn't mean that they are happier than these others. And often means that they're not any happier. They're probably a lot less happy than you are. What does that mean? Well, this is what it means. It means that often people will use humor to cover up the sadness in their lives. And there is a painting, and I hope you see a picture of it, or maybe you'll see the actual painting yourself, that clearly depicts what I'm talking about. Okay? It's a painting of a clown, and this clown is crying. Just crying all over the place. Do I need to say more? I don't think so. Okay. Now then, receiving more attention from the opposite gender isn't always a good thing. And that's because often the opposite gender wants things from you that you are not prepared to give to anybody, much less them. And they will put the peer pressure on you until you give it to them, whether you want to or not. And that's not a good thing. That's a very unhealthy thing. So don't try to seek out the attention of others, because you may get into situations that you don't really want to be in the first place. So that's not a good thing. So if I agree with all those other points, what don't I agree with? Well, let's get into that. Now, it is possible, and I am living proof of this, that you can become smarter than the average person. First, it's easier than you think it is to become that smart. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And there is a biblical reason for doing so. Okay? After all, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, Peter, and even Judas Iscariot, not Iscariot, it's actually Iscariot. Judas was a man from Kerot. Don't believe me? You can look it up for yourself. Okay? All of these people were scribes. Every last one of them. They knew how to read, write, and do basic arithmetic. You say, well, wait a minute. Peter was a fisherman. Yeah, but he had to take his fish to the market. That meant he had to read the prices. He had to write down what he had in line of inventory. And he had to barter. He had to trade his fish for things he actually needed, like nets. See? So he was as much a scribe as anybody else. Even Jesus was endowed with the ability to be a scribe. You say, where do you get that from? Well, if you go to the book of Luke, chapter 4, verses 16 through 20, you will see that Jesus knew how to read and he knew how to write. And I guarantee if he knew both of those, he also knew how to do basic arithmetic. Okay? And if you don't believe me on that, you can refer to the parable of the coin. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. I guarantee you, Jesus knew basic arithmetic. Now, If Jesus is our example, and he knew how to read, and he knew how to write, and he knew how to do basic arithmetic, why don't we? We should. And I have actually been in churches, not all of them, okay? I've been to some churches where the congregations were brilliant. But I've also been in churches where over half the congregation was functionally illiterate. This is completely unacceptable. If Jesus was a scribe, and most of his followers were also scribes, then it is completely unacceptable to be illiterate. Completely. And there's your biblical proof of this. Now, why is that so important? Well, I'm going to tell you why it's so important. Because in first century Galilee, we had a population that was mostly functionally illiterate. Now, back in Judea, they had three groups of people: the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes. These were three different sects of the Jewish faith. And the only way these Galileans understood the Jewish faith at all was they had to understand the interpretations of these three groups of people. And if you didn't agree with any of those groups, you were in mighty big trouble. That's why Jesus showed up on the scene. Jesus himself disagreed with various parts of the theology of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes. And he made a clear point of all of this. And there is a very good book that will illustrate my point. It's called Prophet and Teacher, and it was written by William Herzog, and I actually did a video series on that on my YouTube channel, and you can see it for yourself. Okay? So that's part of the reason why it's so important. Let me tell you something. If you can't read the Bible, then you've got a problem. How do you know that your reverend is teaching you correctly or not? How do you know that he's a true shepherd and not a false shepherd? We did have Jim Jones, did we not? See what I mean? That's why it is so important that you know how to read, how to write, and how to do arithmetic. But that's not the only reason why it's so important, especially in this day and age, when it is so easy to acquire these skills. As a matter of fact, some churches know how important this is, and they regard it so important that they are actually offering literacy classes in their churches. And to those that are doing that, I applaud you. I really do. For those churches who are offering literacy classes or any kind of educational classes in your churches, I agree with that. And I applaud you for it. Okay? Now you say, well, why else is all this important? Because of the eviction and the starvation and the bullyism that millions of people are facing every single day right here in the United States. Do I need to mention the names Columbine, Virginia Tech, Newtown, Connecticut, Paducah, Kentucky, Jonesboro, Arkansas? Do I need to mention any of those names? It is hyper important that kids start getting a real good education and as quick as possible. Because if they don't, they are facing imminent peril every day as they go to school. And it doesn't have to be that way. I know this for a fact. And why does one more person have to work at a low-wage job only because of their lack of education? That should not happen here in the United States. It should never happen in the United States. And if you find it happening to your friends or your family or whatever, stop it. No one should be deprived of higher paying gainful employment solely on the fact that they don't have the necessary education to get that employment. It's a fact. Now, it all starts with a book that I have recommended many times on my YouTube channel. So, what book are you talking about? Well, go watch my featured video and you'll see what book I'm talking about. I've said it so many times, I'm not going to say it again. Now, for some of you, you say, well, I read the book, I didn't fully grasp what it said. Well, allow me to illustrate. Okay? Now, if you've ever been camping, all right, there is something you can take with you when you go camping that will actually heat up your food. And I'm going to put a link to it right down here. It'll be the first link you'll see in the description down below. Okay? Now, if you know anything about horses, there are different breeds of horses. Okay? And one of them is going to be clearly illustrated in a link, a hyperlink, down here below. That'll be the second hyperlink. Okay? Now, if you've ever been sailing, then there's a critical part of a sailing boat you need to know about. And that's the third link down below. Now, if you can picture in your head where you take the picture that I show you in the second link and the horse that I show you, okay, that particular horse, if you will picture that particular horse and you tie what I show you in the first hyperlink and what I show you in the third hyperlink, you tie those objects onto the horse and you heat up the first object, then what you'll have with that combination, that picture combination, will be a muscle that's here around your neck area that actually, this particular muscle of the body actually covers up the carotid artery. Okay? Alright, so what you do is you take the first object I show you, the second object I show you, and the third object I show you, and you combine those three words together, and you come up with a muscle that you would find in the body that covers the carotid artery. And that's how that book that I tell you about actually works. And like I said, the title of that book can be easily found in the featured video on my YouTube channel. So you go to my YouTube channel, you go to the main channel page, you find my featured video, you watch that, and you'll find the title of that book, and you can use it for yourself. And after you read that book, and you learn the art of speed reading, that's the second thing you need to do. Once you learn both of those, then what I recommend people do is to go through every single playlist that I have on my YouTube channel and learn all that material. Once you do that, then bullyism disappears, evictions disappears, and starvation disappears. And I stake my reputation on it. So, that is the only point in your whole video that I did not agree with. And I hope you will put me to the test. You say, well, I never know sometimes when I go to a party or whatever what to say to other people. I get stuck in the mind. Well, you won't after you learn all this. I guarantee you will have plenty of things to talk about, and you'll keep them entertained for hours. Even I have that capability. I don't always use it like I should, but I do have the capability, and I will illustrate that in some future videos. Matter of fact, there are videos on my YouTube channel that clearly illustrate my abilities. But these abilities aren't just mine. You can have them too. Anybody can have these. And they're easily acquired. And I have clearly shown that on my YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and leave those questions down here in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. So in this day and age, after all the material that I have presented on my YouTube channel, there is absolutely no excuse whatsoever to be functionally illiterate. None. Zip, zero, zilch. It's completely unacceptable. I know that's a little stern, but considering all the millions of people that are facing eviction, starvation, and bullyism, you need to become smart. Even if you're not facing any of those three, I guarantee you're going to know people, your friends, your family, doesn't matter. Those people probably are. And if you don't help them out, Well, you're not doing them any much of a service. I can tell you that. Alright, so, except for that one point, I agree with the rest of your video. Which is good news. Whew. Anyway, you say, well, God loves you whether you're illiterate or not. Well, that's true. But God has a serious problem utilizing you without that intelligence. And it's something that is easily corrected and easily fixed. And if anybody has any problems, talk to me and I will assist you until such time as that problem disappears. That's one problem you don't need prayer to answer. My YouTube channel clearly answers that. And I'll work with you until that problem's gone. Now, this YouTube channel that I run here doesn't solve all your problems. It solves that problem. It solves the problem of eviction. It solves the problem of starvation. It solves the problem of bullyism. But it's not going to solve the problem of everything. There are a lot of things only God can solve. Matter of fact, I will go on to say that any kind of an education you get here has to be God-centered. Because otherwise, this YouTube channel that I run could cause you to go on an erroneous ego trip. And I don't want you doing that. So although I believe in a God-centered education, I do believe you have to get educated. And it's an easy thing to do. Much easier than you think. So I don't want people to get this idea that my education would eliminate your need for God. No, no, no. It doesn't. It really doesn't. As a matter of fact, even after you get the education that I provide here on this YouTube channel, you still have to turn to God to know where He wants you to go and what He wants you to do after you learn what you learn from me. Because I'm not going to tell you where you should go. I'm not going to tell you what you should do with all the things you've acquired from me. That's not my job. That's God's job, and I'm glad He does it. He's much better at it than I am. I help you get the skills. After that, only God Himself tells you what you should do with them. And you can do great and mighty things with the kind of skills you can get from me. As a matter of fact, God can utilize you in a great many of ways with what you get from me. After you get what you get from me, He can put you in places you never thought you could be. But that's up to Him. I do my part, God does His part. My part is to educate you. After that, it's up to God. And I leave it in His full capable hands. And there are things you should pray about. But getting a better education isn't one of them. That's the difference. Okay. So as you can see, even I rely on God for a great many of things. I don't rely on Him for my education, but I do rely on Him for a lot of other things. And believe me, there are a lot of things in this life that a good education will never solve. And that's a fact. So I do my part, and God does His part. And believe me, God still plays a great big role in your life, including making sure that you don't become egotistical just because you acquired my education. Acquiring my education should not put an ego trip on you. No, 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 no. I don't want that. You still got to depend on God. Because let me tell you one thing that is even more important than what I've just told you. Without God, you don't have a brain. So if you're thinking that getting my education is going to make you better than God, no, that's not going to happen. Because remember, your brain functions only because God allows it to function. If you start developing an ego trip because of all the things you've learned from me, then God will just cease your brain from functioning, and that'll be the end of that That'd be a real short trip. So, don't get the wrong idea. Don't grow a large ego just because you grow a large brain. Two things are not the same. Okay, well, I think I've said enough. I will tell you more in a future video, so I want you to stay tuned.